Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Bayer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast. I have a now third-time returning guest, Jenny Nuccio. She was one of our earliest guests when we first started doing the podcast, and we had such a good time, and we got such a great response to her story about Imani Collective in Nairobi, or just outside of Nairobi. We had her back, and we're having her back again because she's got some pretty amazing news. So, Jenny, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be continuously getting to chat with you all the time and showing up in this space.
Maybe we'll get you the co-host. How about that?
Don't say that. Don't say that loud because I'll challenge you in that. I'll be right there. Yeah, I'm just so excited to be here and just excited for to share a story a little bit more. I feel like, a lot of you guys have gotten to hear me share just snapshots of our story over the year of growing Imani Collective. But I'm excited to announce that we have a book that is launching called Let It Be Wild, and to get that in your hands and to get even more of the nitty-gritty details of just how we've grown Imani and the challenges and the celebrations and all of it. So I'm excited to let people a little bit more behind the scenes and open that door to the public. So,
well, I appreciate you doing that, and I know people get a lot of smiles and a lot of joy out of seeing what you're doing and the way that you do it. So, gosh, there's so many things we could talk about. First of all, you're coming up on your 10th anniversary in late April, I think, or May.
Late May.
Late May, the 28th, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
So you're coming up on your 10th anniversary. Give us a high level. What has this 10 years been like? Because I know the guests, our listeners will remember when you were guesting the first time that you didn't go over there to start a business. That wasn't the first thing on your mind. And yet here you are a decade later with a very successful global business based out of Kenya. So give us the high level synopsis of the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's, why it's been a wild story for me, because to just see how the Lord has shaped that and has changed my heart and my mindset to what we're doing and doing it for impact. I came over to just serve in a small village and saw gaps and, built relationships with these women and started a training program. But I never at that time thought of how are we sustaining this long term, or how are we creating something that is not just going to be relief or short term, but actually, overall prevention and radically change generations within these different communities. And so I think for me, 10 years is a celebration of personally, a mindset shift, as now my doctorate focused on social sustainability and looking at global social enterprises and then teaching that in the classroom with students as well. I think I'm always what is the element of not just being a social entrepreneur, but what is it with faith integration? What does it mean to actually have social enterprise practices? And to me, that's longevity. That's thinking, okay, when I leave, it's still there and there's a legacy, to be left there. So I think that's also, for me, a big celebration of just when I look at the beautiful organic growth of Imani Collective is not only to see us be successful, for people to be able to get our story, but to all of us as a collective have the mindset shift from charity to actually being a global social enterprise that gets to, bring glory to God in that as well and celebrate Him in that process. And so I think that's been one of my biggest, achievements or accomplishments is that mindset shift of, okay, how are we doing really good stuff, and how are we doing that for the Lord, but also how are we doing it strategically? I didn't have any strategy in the beginning, and I'm just so thankful for platforms like this to share that, but also mentors and coaches and just having that learned spirit throughout the years. You can't stop learning, and I think even still to this day, it's how can we be better? How can we transform? How can we keep changing maybe tweaking our systems to be even greater. And I'm just So I get to thank a lot of people in my book too and share that of just those people who influenced me so much over the years and just really spoke wisdom in my life and just gave me a chance. I think there was a lot of people who didn't believe of what we could be. And so I'm just thankful for those who saw the vision with me.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating journey. It's one of the classic BAM journeys of somebody going overseas with a more of a missionary social service kind of mindset. A lot of compassion, bright, energetic, but not to go do business. And then that door began to open, and watching you now for, several years we've known each other, watching you move from just that, I won't say naive because I don't think that's fair. I don't see you as naive, but certainly kind of not knowing everything to becoming a sponge and willing to be taught and mentored and learn and make mistakes and try new things, to now you've become quite, not just you. I mean, I know that it's a team, so, and I know God's doing it all, but you've become quite a sophisticated business person. And yet you have not lost your fire for the individual and for the community. So that's been, for me, that's been a lot of fun to watch. And you haven't lost. I know there are days when you probably thought, I don't have any fire left, but in the big picture, you're still on fire, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Thanks. And it's okay to call me naive. I call that out all the time. I was like, yep, I was naive. I was like, had lots of zeal, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I think, it's beautiful to see the people, like I said, who've come in my life, both on a like mentors in my faith and challenging me in that, but also mentors on like really strict business acumen. I think one of our biggest pivot points was we got accepted, and I'm not sure if I've shared this in past podcasts, but we got accepted into a program called Stanford Seed Transformation. It was Stanford Seed Transformation Program, and it's with Stanford University. They have like 60 companies in East Africa, and we were the first ever nonprofit that they allowed to be in this program because we met all of their other credentials. This was in 2020. All their other credentials, but the fact that we were a for-profit entity because we hadn't moved into a hybrid yet. And I will say it was because of that program and people before, and that I finally understood, okay, I need to, know my numbers. I need to know my projections. I need to know what it looks like to put a pro forma together. I need to know that stuff. Like, I don't need to just, be leaning on other people to tell me, I think I had done so much of that in the past. And I was like, no, I need to know like the ins and outs of my business, not just my impact. And that was the first time that I hired on. I think I've talked about Ryan with Feast Over Famine as being our fractional CFO, coming on, helping me navigate numbers. And we had a meeting actually just recently, and he was like, I was talking through some of our numbers and looking at like a 5-year projection thing. And I had taken something we had done and I moved things around, and he just like started clapping, and he's like, oh my gosh, you're like telling me what the thing is, like what the model one before, he would be getting all my information and putting it together, kind of regurgitating it to me, and like, but I was doing it and I felt so proud, like, yes. And it was because of Stanford Seed, which overflowed to Ryan, to getting my projections, which made me eventually be like, yes, we need to be a hybrid and move into this more kind of sophisticated model that, yes, is complex, but also is very beautiful in its nature of where it's going to get us to the next level. And it was because of that in 2021, when we moved into that we finally were able to partner with faith-driven, FDE and FDI, faith-driven investor, faith-driven entrepreneur in that community, and get some of our first investors, first big yeses. And and that's been a really big game changer for us to have that and to be able to grow in spaces that we've always wanted to grow in. But I was nervous and I was really scared to take on, some capital or take on debt. But the reality is we did it in a really smart and strategic way for it to push us forward and have some really cool people who are just cheering us on. So that's been fun.
So 3 things you said I want to come back and push a little bit on. So one, you refer to this as a hybrid model. And so explain that to people that are listening that don't know exactly what you mean, because that's been a big thing, trying to figure that out. That's the usual, there are other models out there, but that's not usual. So what do you mean?
So I laugh because I do specialty classes about this, so we could talk 2 hours about hybrid, because there's many different ways that you can run as a hybridity, like, and have hybrid model, whether in entity or in your finances or diversification of revenue and things. You can be an embedded hybrid where you still are a nonprofit, but you're diversifying your revenue in some way. You can be integrated where you like have a nonprofit and a for-profit. You can be external. There's various different stages, but what we are very integrative. We are a for-profit and a nonprofit. And the way that I set the hybrid up is it's a long-term strategy, right? So one thing that I wanted to do and what I wanted to create was to prove that our impact could be sustained by profit revenue alone. That if we didn't get one donation dollar, that we would be okay. Like, we could still have just as much impact as we have. Now, the reality of this model is it takes time. So and what we have projected is by 2026 that we will have a fully sustainable model, meaning that the money that we bring in from our company in the States, and we also have a company in Kenya. So we actually have 4 entities, 2 companies in the States and in Kenya, and we have a nonprofit in the States, and we have an NGO in Kenya, and they all work integratively together. But by the sales profit, like by the profits alone from our sales, from our private limited company in Kenya and from our company in the States, that they could overflow donations monthly through their profits that would sustain our training programs, our holistic programs, our like what we give out in our benefits to our artisans and our trainees in our NGO right now. That takes time to build a business that is bringing in the right amount of profit. So at this point in our hybrid model, we still do need foundations to partner with us. We still need individuals to partner with us. I mean, I still have to bring in quite a bit of money this year, right, for those programs to work. But with the projections that we have, and as I keep checking in, it's very much viable for this to happen. And I'm excited for when we get to that, and that's not too far in 3 years, where I could be like, hey, Mike, we did it. Like, we have a fully sustainable model. And so that idea I started kind of percolating and thinking of that back in 2019. And it was through that Stanford Seed program and through looking at projections with Ryan and these other people and talking through these strategies of like, okay, this could work. It's just going to take some time for it to work. So that's kind of, for me, when I look at a donation in the future, like, I want it to be for expansion and growth, for like, more impact than we can do, not to sustain our current just like regular programmatic, expenses that we're doing within training or childcare or food programs that we have. I want it to be a donation to be able to go further. Not that it's not bad now. Like, give me all your donations out too, right? But I kind of wanted an exit strategy. Like, I will be in Imani Collective for a very long time. It's my heartbeat. But I didn't want myself to be the linchpin. That if Jenny decided to stop bringing in connections or donations or whatever that might be, that they're going to be okay. Like, it works and it's going to be okay. And a lot of that too, Mike, has to do with training. Like, I do tons of leadership training with my team here so that they have the capabilities and just talent to go out and get funding as well. That's, again, training them up. And I've been doing that over the last couple years, and really proud of our team in Kenya and in the States, and that support too.
We'll be right back after a short break.
It's fun to listen to you, because I think about how many people in the broader business's mission or social impact business space really feel like you have to be one or the other. Mm-hmm. And you don't. You really don't. I lean hard in the direction of for-profit sustainability. And people say, well, yeah, okay, that's where we're going, but we're living based on grants and donations now. And someone will come along and say, well, then it's not real business. I say, well, I rethink that. It's just a different source of capital, right? I mean, right. You could be burning through your life savings. You could be burning through your inheritance. You could be working a side hustle to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. Or you can basically get eternally minded donors who say, yeah, we're going to invest in this. We don't get a big return out of it in a financial way, but it is enabling something to get going. And the long-term view of being able to say not only that it is financially self-sustainable, but it's also the idea that you're raising up your leaders so that, God forbid, you get run over by the bus in the classic Nairobi traffic jams. The thing doesn't end with you. And I think we pay lip service to that often, but I've seen so many Americans in particular go overseas, start a church, and 30 years later, they're still pastoring that church. Like,
Right.
I can't argue with that because I don't know God's will for their life, but I know that it just doesn't seem like that's the long-term play of really raising up, not just the next generation of leaders, but generations, plural, of leadership, so that this thing becomes, everything that you dream for it to be. So I love that story. Tell us, I want to talk about the thought about investment, because you told me earlier, and then you alluded to it just a second ago, that you were fearful of debt or fearful of investors and so forth. Understand that, totally understand that. Most of the companies I've started, we bootstrapped, but not every one of them. And so I know the fear, and most people, again, back in the business as mission space, are kind of living a little arm's length from the investment community. Now, thankfully, Henry and Ruben and some of the other folks at FDI and FDE have really begun to take that to a new place and make it much more normal. But talk about your transition there, because you really did. That's a pivot, knowing you now for, I guess, 3 years, maybe 4 years, and seeing the pivot. That didn't surprise me, but I'm just curious as to how you got to it and what it felt like.
Yeah, I think, for the longest time, I had the charity mindset, and because we just had such supportive individuals over the years. So I knew that, okay, I was not ever thinking truly strategically. I'd be like, oh, let's hire this. We need more, we want more impact. In the end, though, it was like how I always guaranteed a consistent salary, right? This is part of my story of like, I never have paid per piece item. Like, we've always given consistent salary. Now, on months where we weren't selling anything, because that happened like for a while, right? Before we actually had a clear strategy, I was just dependent on these donors. So I would always just was in crisis management. And that is how I lived and managed Imani Collective for a long time. And I'm actually already like starting to draft a new book about fund development and how I hurt so many relationships, because this future, but it's just like, I want people to know like what not to do, because I did so much of that. And I'm so grateful for people who are just have forgiving hearts, who like hear me out now. And I'm just like, I'm so sorry for like you always feeling I just came to you for like that dollar, And so that's really interesting in that mindset in the nonprofit of just always tapping on people's door. And so for me, another fearful, so I always knew that was like a backup plan. And so I always never moved into strategy. And so I was like, okay, we got to change here. But what was my biggest fear is there are several, and I won't say them on this podcast, but there are several companies that we always have been compared to. Interesting enough, some have shut down, but we were always compared to them in kind of the artisan space. And I try not to get annoyed with that over the years. They were a couple years ahead of us. I just feel like we're different. And I kept watching what they were doing, though, and like really observing. And one of the things of Company A that kept doing is they kept bringing on debt, and the founder was just not smart about it. And I would observe it and found out later, they were in millions of dollars of debt, and just like had gotten so, again, just trying to find a quick fix. And so my quick fix was always, go to the donor, right? We're going to make it with the donation. But like the bad part about that is it burned out my donors, and it like literally that's so much stress on a leader when you're just like in that crisis constantly. And so I was like, we have to get out of that, but how are we strategic in bringing on investment? And I think by allowing other people to speak into my life, to stop comparing myself with, okay, that's what they did. The beauty of that is I saw what they did, and I knew what they did and several other companies did.
Okay.
So I knew we wanted to do it differently. And so I just learned, and I learned the spaces that I needed to be in and pitch in that would understand what I was trying to say, because I had pitched many times friends and family rounds, or just close networks that I felt would understand, and they just never did. It just kept being a closed door, a lot of no's. And so not only was I fearful to take on debt, I was really like disheartened by so many no's that I had gotten already. But I heard an interesting statistic the other day, and they said you have to pitch like 35 to 40 times before you finally get your first yes. And I will say that's pretty like spot on because until we got like our first yes for like a small investment, maybe like 10,000 or 5,000, 10,000. Until we got that small yes, it was like I had a lot of no's before and a lot of practice of how to like share our story. But being grateful for
it used to be 20,
that.
they would say. And so now it's up to 30, 35, which doesn't surprise me.
Yes.
It's a lot more fish in the sea. But you're right. You can't handle the no's. Of course, you know the rule that if you don't ask, it's always no. It's hard. It's very hard. And I wonder, again, I think about our listeners, I wonder how many of them are really fearful of the ask. They don't mind taking on investors. They just wish they'd show up at the door with money and not have to be asked. It doesn't work like that. So, what difference has it made to your business, to Imani, that you've been able to bring in these investors? Have you, and I'm thinking in terms of, have you given up any control? Has it opened up new doors, new opportunities, expansion? What has happened as a result of finally, biting the bullet, getting out there, doing it, and being successful at it? Yeah. So what difference has it made?
Yeah, we're currently like in process for the first time that I might give up a bit of equity to be able to strategically move into different like marketing, sales kind of areas. But right now I do still have full like ownership of Imani. I think what's been beautiful is the people that I have, again, they have to say yes to you, but the beauty is I can say no to them, right? So it's like, that's what I've learned too, is like, wow, this is like, if it doesn't align right, like I also have that power to do that. I think when you need money and you kind of need to move or need it to maneuver to grow, like you feel a little bit of the pressure that they have the higher negotiation power, but the reality is you have it as well. And if you have a story, right, that is they want to be a part of, it's intriguing and they gravitate towards that. And so I found that I have a little bit of that superpower of like, we have an amazing story, our culture is amazing, and we continue to grow year over year. Like there's not a loss in that. And so we do have something there. Now, our business is not like a tech business, or it's not something that is going to just like skyrocket. It is a very like steady growth, and we have to, we have to grow with our demand. So being handmade and slow made, there's processes to this that it's not going to be like this fast growth. And so for me, it's not a great equity sell. Like most people are like, well, like how, like we're not going to be making like tons of money, and that's to be like, or tons of profits until we get to a certain year as I've projected, right? And I'm like, it's still not going to be like tons of profits off of just what we're sustaining either, but it's going to be a beautiful, sustainable model. So I'm like, not sure if you want like equity in this, but I think what's been great is having the impact investors. All of our debt is loan to debt and in very patient capital. So that's been my sell, is like, I know I can turn profit with what you're giving me and put it into marketing, put it into a lot of where we're going is into marketing. And now this year, face-to-face markets, being back to grow our wholesale and our trade shows. March 1st, we're launching a distribution center in the UK. So that's happened this year. So we're now getting to go into different regions. So I know where our growth is. I know where we're going. You just have to be patient with me paying that back, right? So a lot of people, they just see the joy and they just want to be a part of the impact of, we are almost employing almost 200 people here. So what does that look like? Wow. And we're partnering now with other people.
That's almost doubled since we started talking.
Right. So they just want to be a part of that. And so those are the people I'm aligned with, where it's like, okay, yeah, it's going to be like 10% or less interest, right? And it's slow. I'm going to pay you back in about 3 years and we're going to defer it a little bit. But those are the people I want to partner with, because they understand I need the influx to be able to move the needle, to be able to continue marketing, to grow my e-commerce, to be not only successful in our wholesale and across the regions in the US, Canada, Australia, UK, and all these places we're growing, but to also be a leading e-commerce. And that takes some money to put into marketing. And so people really see that and understand that. And I'm just, been grateful for that.
Well, and it's so important. And my own company has been private equity backed from the beginning. And we were bought and sold 6 times before I finally got out. And sometimes they would buy
Wow.
into your vision. The investor would buy in and they say, we believe in what you're doing. We believe in the way you're doing it. That was really fun. And other times they didn't. And we had dysfunctional boards, and we had investors that wanted their money back way ahead of what was reasonable. So, having the kind of investors and creditors that you've been able to bring on, I mean, that's a dream. And
Yeah.
you mentioned, I mean, I speaking from an American perspective, which is where I'm headquartered right now, 8 to 10% interest sounds really good.
Yeah.
When the banks are paying 0.75%, and the stock market is not returning, 8% on average. So there's a lot of financial goodness there, but the other side of it, and I don't know if you've read the book or seen the book that Don Simmons put out, the Steward Investor. I would encourage you to not only read it, but also to share it with your community, particularly the investor community, because the thinking about a kingdom capital mindset versus just a capital mindset is
right.
It's really quite healthy, and it's what you just described. We believe in what you're trying to accomplish. We're willing to hang in there. We're not trying to get rich. Yes, we want return, but we're not trying to get rich. And we recognize there may be some increased risk, but that's okay. It's for the kingdom. It's not a donation. It's not charity, but it's a thoughtful capital that he calls it the Steward Investor. And we did a podcast on it, and I'm a huge fan of it. Speaking of, we start coming in for landing here. Your book, okay?
Yes.
But we want to hear about that. I've got a few notes here. It's going to be coming out May 29th of this year. It will be available on Amazon and many other portals.
Yes.
And the name of it is Let It Be Wild. And I got to ask you this question, and then I want you to tell us about it. Is it going to be by Jennifer Nuccio, PhD, or is it just going to be by Jenny Nuccio?
I actually am putting Dr. Jenny Nuccio. So
I asked that tongue in cheek.
I'm gonna stamp it there.
You're looking for that.
But I laugh because I just put by Jenny Nuccio, and then my illustrator did the cover. So she's our illustrator at Amani Collective. So she created this beautiful cover for it, and it's just amazing. And so when she sent it back to me, she had put Dr. Jenny Nuccio, and I was like, I guess it's coined. We're just gonna keep it there.
It's like what? I love it. But we'll put it. This will all be in the show notes. We'll have the website for Amani Collective. Many of the listeners already know about it, but we have new listeners that don't. So it'll be in the show notes. The name of the book, and it'll be by Dr. Jennifer Nuccio, which I think is fun. I see you're smiling. You guys can't see her because we're doing a Zoom video, but all you get is the sign. You can probably hear the smile in her when she talks. All right, so tell us about the book. What moved you to write it, and then what is it we should expect to see in it?
Right. So I think a lot of people are going to expect to hear what we kind of talked about, and it's not really that. It's really my story, and it's not written in chronological order. I put timelines throughout the book because I bounce back and forth from when I'm sitting in a Minyata and Turkana with our women, and then when I'm, in college and going through just growing pains, right, to when I met my husband. And I actually talk a lot about my husband in the book because he has an amazing story. So I was like, if you're not going to tell your story, I'm going to tell your story. So he's interwoven throughout the book of just how much I've learned from him and how to be so immersive and how to love others with so much grace. Because I think I know a lot of how I lead is influenced by what he's taught me and just being the hands and feet of Jesus. And so I think for me, it's the genesis of why I, went to Kenya in the first place and how I got there. But the book really shows my growth in leadership. It shows lessons I've learned over the years and that big mindset shift, right? I talk a lot about how we just live differently with an open door policy. And again, being immersed in community and really radically listening to the community, what they need versus me assuming, right, what they need. And so just kind of these practices and things that I've learned over the years. And I called it Let It Be Wild because that's exactly what it's been this journey of just encompassing that kind of wild spirit, but not a reckless wild. It's this spirit of truly listening to where the Lord is opening the doors and not being afraid to walk through them. Like that has been my whole journey. And so I encourage readers throughout the book of how are you encompassing your let it be wild spirit? It doesn't mean you move overseas, right? And it, like what's in your backyard, how can you use your talents and your skills that the Lord has equipped you with to go out and serve him with all your ability and your strength and your might. And so I think, although it's my story, I tie it back to, again, how are you going out there and let it, just letting it be wild.
It sounds very much like if we were sitting down having a cup of coffee in Kenya and we had an hour or so for you to share your heart on a personal level.
Yep.
It sounds like that's what the book is.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I'm so glad I journaled a lot in my early years of coming to Kenya. I've spent now over a third of my life here and more Kenyan than I really am American now, mannerisms and things that I do. But I'm so glad I journaled because I was able to, when I went back to my mom's house, pull out all these journals that I had over all of my first trips and what I processed back then. Like that stuff I don't remember, but I was able to read through all of my thoughts and the way I would process the way I thought back then, which was fascinating. And be able to pull from that to be able to be inspired to put my mind back there in some of those stories, especially in the beginning stories of me stepping for the first time in Kenya and what that looked like. So inspired by journals and prayer journals and things. And just my story.
I can't wait to get a copy of it. In fact, you promised me one, so I'm going to give you my address.
I know. Yes, you have to.
I do. I definitely want to encourage all of our listeners to, when it comes out, get a copy, share a copy. Jenny's delightful to get to know. She's got such a great spirit and joy, and God is using her in some very groundbreaking ways that she wouldn't have dreamed of, which is what tells me it's a God thing and not a Jenny thing. But you've been willing, as you say, to let it be wild, to walk through the doors. He's opened them, and that's been fun to watch. So always good to catch up. After the book is back out, we'll get you back on again. You'll be the first one to get to the 4th episode. But the other thing is, I don't know if you guys saw this or heard this or not, but Jenny alluded to another book already that's germinating.
Yes.
So at some point in the year or two, we'll be talking more about another one. So, Jenny, any last words of encouragement or wisdom for our listeners before we sign off?
I think just, go out, you do you, and let it be wild.
Let it be wild.
Mic drop.
I love the title. I absolutely love the title, and it speaks of freedom that we as believers should be enjoying every day. Not keeping the rules, not doing the rules, but being wild for the Lord. That's free, right? It's for freedom that Jesus has set us free. So I love that. So again, look at the show notes, Jenny Nuccio from ImaniCollective.com, and check it out. Check out the products. Who knows? You just missed Christmas, but you may have some birthdays or anniversaries or stuff you want to get. So check it out. Look for the book in May, and we'll definitely be keeping in touch with you, Jenny. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or tryventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen. The Business as Mission podcast is in partnership with TriVenture, the BAM Launchpad. TriVenture offers the 3 ingredients every entrepreneur needs to launch and scale a BAM business: courses, coaching, and capital. For more information, visit tryventure.com.